Well, good afternoon. I'm the last speaker between you and the bar. So I'm going to use the next 25 minutes to just talk about space mobility from our vantage point at DIU. And part of that is the role that everybody in this room plays. So special thanks to our friends in the Space Force, across the interagency to include NASA, and a special thanks to all of you, the commercial companies that are actually going to help us realize this outcome. So, see, I'll put my title slide here. Maybe I won't. Could you advance the slide, please? Thank you. So I'm going to be talking about winning with space mobility. And winning is a very important thing. You know, we're in business in the Department of Defense to focus on great power competition and making sure that the United States, from a national security standpoint, remains first. Most of what I'm going to talk about in this brief is to amplify a lot of the comments that you've already heard this, at least the last 2 days, about space mobility and logistics and space access. I'm going to make the case for why the U.S. needs to be in a leadership role and why it's also imperative that we set the foundation for our allies and partners to join us so that we set precedent and that we determine the outcomes for how we utilize the space domain for all walks of life, right? Next slide. So a little bit about DIU. Since our inception in 2015, we started with the mission of building a bridge between the commercial sector and the government sector. You have to realize that at that time, then Secretary of Defense Ash Carter really wanted to make sure that the Department of Defense had full access to the rapidly evolving commercial technology coming from places like Silicon Valley, Massachusetts, the Boston ecosystem, growing ecosystem in Boston, and other innovation centers around the United States. We did that. But we soon found out that unless we were transacting with companies, it was really not going to go very far. So shortly after that, we went to a different model in the center that allowed us to use our innovative contracts using other transaction authorities to put companies like most of you in the audience under a prototype where you could demonstrate to us the viability of your commercial solutions to solve national security problems. And this is the reason that we did this is because today the commercial sector outspends the government almost 4 to 1 in terms of investments in research and development. And all you have to do is watch the news on a day-to-day basis to see how dynamic and how competitive that environment is, even with the news this week for artificial intelligence. So it just reinforces why it's so important that we work together in a strong partnership with our commercial partners. Today, our models evolved once again. When we started back in 2015, we were the only innovation organization in the Department of Defense. Today, there's almost 100 organizations that contributed at the tactical, operational, and strategic level of the Department of Defense. And that doesn't even include the ones in other parts of the government. So today, we focus on the most strategic problems and the most strategic applications of commercial technology to close capability gaps and to create new ways of solving tough problems. Next slide. Our mission statement is reflected here. It's always been the acceleration of adoption of commercial technology, but in 2023, we added the last part, at speed and scale. Speed means at the speed of relevance. We can't buy and field today's technology if we don't get the money to buy it for 3 years, right? So we have to figure out how do we close the loop so that we can give the warfighter the advantage of having the best tools available today at the point of need. And that scale is something that's very important for this audience. We achieve scale through production, and production is the outcome of manufacturing of plants, and we have a new challenge that we're seeing the evolution of new heavy lift reusable launch vehicles that can put an amazing amount of capacity on orbit. But our supply chains are still not in tune with this new model. Right? So we have a lot of exquisite systems, exquisite supply chains, and that don't have a lot of depth. So we're focused on, in space, on doing the last part, the speed and scale at DIU. Next slide. So a little bit more on DIU. So we span a whole regime that starts with talent and bringing the most capable talent into the department, either doing it on the government side or commercially. We work with others, all the SpaceWorks, AFWorks, SoftWorks, NavalX, all these different innovation organizations to develop things, make sure there's a continuous path from their entry point on this on-ramp, usually with SBIR or STTR programs, to more of a developmental phase where we're able to increase the viability and ready them for a fast-paced prototype that leads to a transition to a program of record preferentially, although not everything we buy today is as a program of record. But it's important that we do that, and as part of that journey is that we address the production and scaling of those solutions. Next slide. The way we do this is with a contract instrument we call the Commercial Solutions Opening. It's an other transaction agreement. It's the same basic authority that enabled NASA to put man on the moon in the 1960s. We fine-tuned it to make it more like a fully negotiable contract instrument. For anybody in the audience who's never worked with the government before, this is the tool for you, because you don't have to know anything about the Department of Defense or how it acquires things. What you have to have is a well-defined business plan that demonstrates some technical feasibility, commercial viability, and a path that we can actually work with you to get you into the defense market. The commercial viability is very important. So we assess all that through 3 phases of our CSO, and with the idea that we start with a large number of companies and we funnel down to a smaller number that we will actually take into prototype through a full-up demonstration. The best part about it is in red. There's no requirements at the top side, and there's no need to recompete at the bottom side of this graph. The other interesting thing is, when you work with DIU, we're a facilitator. We're not your customer. We work with you to make it easier for you to work with DoD, and we work within DoD to make it easier for them to work outside of the department. And then we partner with anybody in the defense ecosystem to make sure that we put points on goal. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to talk more specifically about our space portfolio. We have 7 portfolios at DIU: autonomy, artificial intelligence, cyber, energy, human systems, emerging technology, and so and many others. But the key thing is that what we do is in space is really focused on these 6 areas. And we didn't just come up with these. These are bins that, if you say everything that we are working on today would fit neatly in one of these 6 bins. For this audience, the space access, mobility, and logistics really cuts horizontally across all 6 of these. So that all 6 of these areas is critical to that. From responsive space, it's not just the ability to launch, but to go to, from, or through space. And we have a special use case of this for terrestrial point-to-point. Resilient communications, probably our largest infrastructure project that we're working on at DIU is the hybrid space architecture, which is in partnership with the US Space Force, is really how do we connect everything? There is no internet in space, so how do we achieve one? And for resiliency and viability from a commercial standpoint. Persistent sensing, which is different from intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. Only the government can do intelligence. We have a very good growing industry for remote sensing, for space remote sensing in the private sector. And in the defense context, we use that information for situational awareness, real-time situational awareness, and help us with decision making. We have a lot of sensors that are in the battle space, and not all of them are owned by the government. So how do we integrate all that and provide real-time information to the warfighter? Dynamic space operations is really an evolution. I know there's been talk about it today, but this is where we kind of bin all of our in-space logistics and servicing, modularity, all those concepts, because all those are enablers in our view for dynamic space operations. Advanced power and propulsion. We are doing work in concert with others in the government on advanced nuclear propulsion, but the type of nuclear propulsion using sources that you get from a hospital, not too unlike cobalt-60 and things of these nature. And also we've done electric propulsion, and we just recently ran a competition for electrospray. And finally, assured PNT. We need assurance. Our economy is completely tied to the hip with precision timing, and it's very important that we find other ways to build resilience and take advantage of our commercial sector to do that. Next slide. Now, a little bit more about space mobility and why it's so important to us. So if you look across human history, every time there's a different modality of transportation that's been introduced, it usually spawns tremendous economic opportunity, but there's a big but caveat. The people who benefit the most from those emerging modalities are the first movers, right? So not the fast followers, the first movers. So it's really important. If you look at railways as a good example, and the U.S. was the first to create transcontinental railroad. So it wasn't the first with rail, but how it employed it, and that turned the United States into an economic juggernaut. Maritime. Telecommunications as a modality for the transport of data. All of these are very good, and some of them have wandered off the chart. Horses, canal shipping, because they were supplanted by other transportation modalities. The reason we put space logistics on here, all the estimates say that we'll have a $1 trillion economy by the year 2030. And a big part of unlocking that $1 trillion plus economy is going to be transportation. It's going to be that space mobility and logistics. From a commercial standpoint, and of course, if you're in the military, logistics is key to everything that we do across every other domain, and it will not be any different in space. Whoever controls and has superiority in doing mobility and logistics in space will ultimately have an upper hand in determining outcomes should we have to deter, defend, or win our future wars. Next slide. So key enablers to this, and the reason why we are all focused so intently on SAML, or Space Access Mobility Logistics today, and really proving that this is an area that's ready for operational use, is two things. One is cadence, or our ability how frequently we can get to orbit and deliver mass, and then the other is the cost of putting that mass on orbit. So the cadence is going way up, and the cost of launch is going down, and that's an inflection point that has been really key to making sure that we have commercially viable means of being able to do the things that have been talked about in this conference. But we can't just stop there. We need diversity. We need other forms of infrastructure. Next slide. We need to think about spaceports, and not just the western and eastern test ranges, but we need spaceport diversity. The space needs to be a global activity. And we have this requirement that because of the nature of space and rockets, we have to have a technology safeguard agreement in place with the countries that we operate with. But can we launch and have sea-based launch from international waters? So many different models are being looked at, and the key thing is that none of these things need to be owned and operated by the government. We have government facilities, and we will probably have more government facilities for special applications in the future, But just as we leverage commercial launch today, we need to leverage commercial or other sponsored spaceports in the future that can stay relevant and ready and accessible and be really the economic proving grounds for all the things that we're going to do. Next slide. So I put this slide in here because we did this work back during COVID, and we haven't updated it recently, but it's starting to show some traction. And the idea is, as we unfurl the new space economy, what are the things that we want to have in place or need to have in place so other economic activities can be successful and vibrant? So this is, if you mixed up all these pieces and put it back in order, like, you know, doing water and rocket fuel generation from the moon, probably wouldn't be successful if not for all the enablers that will set that into motion. But you can see that we put mobility was the next critical enabler after communications. And there are things that we're doing in the communications realm within the next 12 to 18 months that's going to be really transformative. And really, it's like top companies in America and our allies are all involved with this. And the Space Force is actually driving a big part of this as well, which is going to be tremendously beneficial for everybody in the room. But then we have to take action on that mobility layer. So we can actually have, not just have the launch vehicles, but have, you know, the ability to move the cargo, to be able to move material or fuel, you know, between different orbits. We have to, you know, even reentry, having a safe, reliable means for being able to produce goods on orbit and get them back to the Earth is all key. Then there's the servicing and assembly, which is how do we sustain our infrastructure in space? Right now, it's not economically viable to sustain things in LEO unless they're platforms for large-scale things. Most of the satellites just burn up in the atmosphere. And of course, space manufacturing is at the bottom because it needs to leverage all the capacity above in order to be successful, especially if you're using resources from off-world. So with this, I'm going to stop and next slide and take some questions from the audience. And there are currently no questions. So if you take a look, I think if we go back, go one slide, there'll be a QR code which you can use. There you go, right over here on the right. And please upload some questions. I'd be more than happy to take a few with my remaining time. Does anybody in the front have a question they'd like me to repeat and then answer while we're waiting for the technology to catch up? Yes? So if you're from academia and you want to know how do we integrate all these things to achieve our mission? Oh, how do we leverage academia? This is actually very good. So we already work with academia. So we have an organization as part of DIU that's called the National Security Innovation Network. And part of their job is to go out and work through universities. A great story, we have a program that we pay for called Hacking for Defense, which is at many universities across the United States. Back in the early days of DIU, I was actually the military mentor for a group of graduate students at Stanford University that actually spun out of the university and started Capella Space, which today does synthetic aperture radar small sats, which is fun because at the time, there was a big argument about whether you could do that with small satellites, but they actually did it and they were quite successful. So academia is actually, it's critical in two ways. One is getting, having people with ideas, fresh ideas to solve, you know, traditional problems. The other way academia is important is developing the workforce. We have a workforce challenge across all sectors at NASA, DoD, the intelligence sector, And a lot of those jobs don't require college degrees anymore either. There's I'm very passionate about blue collar space, and what does that look like? And so there we need like special skills training that you maybe be able to get through a community college, or another type of academy or a university environment. So academia is a critical partner, not just here but abroad. We're sponsoring 2 studies right now. Actually, I think 3 studies with universities both here in Australia, looking at in-space manufacturing and what's the most economical model for enabling it. So we go out to academia to help us inform a lot of the information that we put in the presentations like I just gave. So thank you, that's a great question. Oh, look at this, now I have like a cajillion questions. Okay. A lot of your initiatives seem similar to other DoD initiatives. Yes, that would be true. How do you work collaboratively with SSC, for instance? Well, thank you. And SSC is the Space Systems Command. So I actually have 2 people who are embedded from Space Systems Command in my organization up in Silicon Valley. I have a person from my organization who's embedded in the Space Development Agency out in Virginia. We have other people from other space organizations across the department who've come to DIU to work on space issues that are important to their service or to their agency. So we work very collaboratively. In fact, our model completely would fail if we didn't have collaboration. And I think that's one of the bright spots. Remember I mentioned we have 7 portfolios at DIU. I'm very fortunate because one, the space community is really a great community. Just, everybody's very nice. It's small, so a lot of people know each other. And the Space Force is small, which is actually very helpful because there's, it's much easier to work with small organizations. But that's how we collaborate. And you'll see a lot of things. We always have to have a DoD partner. So most of the things, if you look, under the hood of what we're doing, like when I talked about the hybrid space architecture, the Space Force they're our transition path, right? Because they ultimately have the responsibility of providing the military with communications from space. What are the top 3 problems you are trying to solve? Well, if you went back to that slide where I had our focus areas, from left to right, and I'll just recount them: responsive space, resilient communications, and the third one was persistent sensing and fusion. And fusion is important because all of us in the room appreciate that if you get a picture from a satellite, that's not a picture from a satellite from 3 seconds ago. Sometimes those pictures, it's a couple hour journey because they get taken, they have to overfly a ground station, and then there you go. And so we want to do that. Plus, we do a lot of processing for the government in terrestrially in places like Virginia, which is great, and we need to do that for our national intelligence, but that's not always the best model if you want real-time information. And remember, the time it takes for that information to get to a warfighter is either an advantage or a disadvantage. So we want to give our warfighters a tremendous advantage. The financial sector put fresh fiber optic cable across the North Atlantic to get a few milliseconds of decisional advantage for trading. And that's how strategic that was for them. We actually have the same problem. So we don't want in great power competition, if our adversaries have a decisional advantage because they have better superiority in terms of information coming from space, that's not a good place for us to be. Okay, last question. How does DIU think about supporting innovation programs that are not getting funded through the POM process? Really quick, because I have a minute left. Thank your congressional members because in FY24, 2024, this last fiscal year, is the first year that DIU got a large chunk of money for something that we would call a hedge fund. And what do I mean by hedge fund? The Space Force programs money and they have to, that's the POM process, and it often takes 3 years for that money to reach them so they can actually put it into motion. So while we're prototyping, the money that we get is available in the same year of execution. So that's why we call it like a hedge fund. So we can actually take that money, work in partnership with the services, our combatant commands, and say, where do we need to make our DIU investments today with our dollars, with the idea that we're going to give you we're going to give a lot of momentum and help lay down a path so when those programs of record go into motion in the out years, then you know they can get something to the field and sustain it and have actually forces trained to use it. All this in a least amount of time. I know that doesn't sound ideal, and the reprogramming of the way that we do acquisition is something that's very important and needs to happen, but this is a great interim step. So with that, I'm going to thank you all. My time is done. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today, and I'll be here all day tomorrow if anybody want to follow up with me. So thank you.